Hello everyone, it's Danny Wilson from Boxing Science. Welcome to another episode of Boxing Science TV. This is another great episode that we've got lined up for you. It's all about tapering strategies for boxing to make sure that your athletes or yourself are performing optimally when it comes to competition. Now, just before we get into this episode, I'd like to ask you a small favour and please click the subscribe button. We've got loads of new content lined up over the next coming weeks and we don't want you to miss out on it. So just click the subscribe button and make sure that you don't miss another episode of Boxing Science TV. Okay, so welcome to episode 8. It's all about the science behind the taper. We're going to be explaining tapering strategies for boxing and combat sports. And a lot of people have been asking me questions lately about, how do I taper for competition? What should I do fight week? When should I start my taper? And these are all very important questions because it's very complicated and a contrasting time period for training. If you do too much, then you end up being a little bit overtrained. If you do too little, you might lose your fitness. Now, there's different ways that we go about it. It depends on the athlete, their trainability, how strong they are, how fit they are, how much weight they have to lose in the coming weeks towards a fight. Also, like whether they're amateur boxer or professional. We know that a professional boxer, they might not fight for another 10 weeks. Amateurs might be fighting every week, or in certain contexts where we've been doing like championship bouts, they might be boxing the next day. So we need to make sure that they are getting the right amount of stimulus. So in this episode, mainly it's going to be a little bit of taster from our weekend workshops. Dr. Alan Ruddock actually covers this in one of his seminars, Tapering Strategies for Boxing. He's going to be explaining the science behind it, what does research suggest, and how we actually apply it. And then after that, I'm going to share a few of the methods that we use at Boxing Science. But before all of that, I'm going to give you a snapshot of what a taper looks like when I was tapering down Jordan Gill for one of his recent fights.
So, if you've ever got guys on a real true tapering week and they're coming up to an event, or if you're working with an athlete, then you know how precious that athlete can be in the tapering week, or how grumpy that they can be if you are working with a boxer or combat athlete that's making weight. It's really one of these periods of time where you can either get a boxer that goes completely mad, that wants to keep training and pushing because they don't feel like they're prepared, or someone where you're holding them back and they're just bouncing off the walls. It's quite a difficult time to manage psychologically as well as physiologically as well. So there's been a few definitions as to what tapering actually is, and a few things, so it's a specialised exercise training technique designed to reverse train-induced fatigue, very scientific. Short-term reduction in training load, yeah, that's what it is. Reduced period of training volume to enhance performance. So that's what we mean when we're talking about tapering for competition. So there are a few different ways in which you can taper. So this is our normal training here, and this is our percentage of normal training on the y-axis. So this is 100%. So up until this point, this day of taper, our athlete is functioning at 100% of normal training. This is what they're doing normally, typically. And then as they enter the taper, and if you've programmed it correctly, they'll be doing one of these 4 different things. So you have a linear approach in which you decrease load in a logical manner by a certain percentage each and every day. You can take an exponential approach, either slow decay or a fast decay, or you can just step right down from normal training and just keep a constant training load throughout. And there's been some research to suggest that there is an optimal way in which you should taper. So you can either do your normal training and then just go straight into a taper, which might not be the best way to do it from a physiological or psychological perspective. If you've got an athlete that's used to training hard, then just switching from that to just doing half of what they're doing, that's going to mess around with them a bit psychologically. So what does the research say about reducing training volume? Well, as always, we're looking for that sweet spot, that optimal time period. You know, we're always looking to optimize that approach. And if we look at the research that's been done, you get a dose response curve. So down here we've got percentage decrease in training volume. So some researchers have looked at the studies that have done a 20% or less decrease in training volume all the way up to, 60% or more, okay? And they've done some statistics on it. So this value here, these values relate to how big their effect on performance was. So when they did a taper, they dropped off by a certain volume, and then they measured their performance, and then they standardized their performance across a range of different tests. And this gives us like a standardized score here for the different studies. And what they found was reducing training volume by 40 to 60% seems to be optimal in improving performance. These error bars relate to the confidence, how confident we are that that's a true effect. So the others, you know, sometimes if you decrease training volume by up to 20%, sometimes there might actually be a decrease in performance. So if you're not actually reducing training volume enough, you might have some lag, some fatigue that you're taking into competition. If you're doing too much reduction in training volume, then you might also get no change in performance, i.e. you're not taking advantage of the taper. Or some cases you might even see a small decrease in performance. So having an optimized approach is really key, and using this evidence is really important. So that's volume. Intensity has the same. So this is data from over 400 athletes, from swimmers and cyclists and runners, surprisingly not boxers. So they looked at how these athletes were manipulating their intensity in a taper. So you can decrease volume and you can also decrease intensity. You can decrease volume but have no decrease in intensity as well. Again, this is our effect size down here, this standardized measure that compares performance in different tests. And what they found is, if you decrease intensity in the taper, then you're probably going to get a negative effect on performance, which is why it's that message where we say intensity is so important, not only for training adaptations, but taking advantage of training effects as well in the taper. So if you decrease intensity in a taper, you're likely compromising performance. If you don't decrease intensity, i.e. you maintain it or increase it, then you're getting a huge difference there from this group to this group. So this is the performance improvement, standardized measure of performance. And here you can see, if you maintain intensity in a taper, that's going to be beneficial to your performance. About the number of days, how long should you taper for? So we looked at volume, we looked at intensity. Now, what should we be doing? How long should we be doing this taper for? So down here is the duration, it's the number of weeks. Over here again is our measure of effect size, this standardized score for different measures of performance. Here is our estimate for doing 1 week. So if you do a taper for 1 week, then you might get a small effect on performance, but there might also be some negative effects. It might be that 1 week is not enough. If you do 2 weeks, this was actually 10 to 14 days, something like that, I think, then we can actually be quite confident that that is going to be a pretty good duration to run a taper across. So we'll start to look at tapering over about 2 weeks. And then 3 weeks and 4 weeks, you can see 4 weeks is probably, 3 weeks and 4 weeks is probably definitely too long to see to be confident that we're going to get an improvement in performance. So why is the taper effective? Well, some of the possible mechanisms: increases aerobic capacity because Some research suggests that it increases blood volume and red blood cell production. Gives you a chance for oxidative enzyme function to start to see adaptations because you've decreased training load. Better oxygen extraction because of that, and improved economy. Perhaps some biomechanical factors as well, so you're feeling a little bit fresher, moving a little bit better, and some neural factors as well. And yeah,
doing something.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that's that's some of the stuff that we do with the bands and with and without bands, working on mobility and just generally helping them feel fresh and forceful. Improving strength and force development as well. Other things to consider: massage, physical therapy, and mobility. Compression garments. Interesting with compression garments. The research suggests that they don't work to help enhance recovery, but if they make you feel good, then use them. They're not harmful, and in some respects they might help your athlete make weight as well because they raise blood pressure. Hydration. Do you have to manipulate hydration anyway? Do you have to water load? Do you have to restrict water? Do you have to manipulate glycogen? Do you have to go in a major calorie deficit? How are you going to fuel for these sessions? Do you have to travel? And how stressful that is? Is it overseas? Is it in the UK? The duration of it? How are you getting there? How long it's going to take? Are you going to do something special, like some heat work or altitude? Or are you going to somewhere where it's hot? Are you going to somewhere where it's a little bit higher up? But yeah, they're all the things that can integrate into the taper, especially at professional level, which makes it all a little bit confusing.
The compression garments, maybe slightly very off the side. Have you seen the Normatec system?
Okay, yeah, I've not used the Normatec. Yeah.
It's basically just compression.
Yeah.
But at a very high level.
Yeah.
Is that something that's in the research at the minute?
I've not. I had a look at the research probably 2 years ago, but I didn't find anything. Didn't find anything at all. I think they've gained a lot of publicity to the athletes that they've got on board. That doesn't necessarily mean to say there's sound evidence behind it, does it? But yeah, a lot of athletes like it, and I don't actually think it's harmful. And if you've got some athletes that need to make weight, then using compression as a way to elevate blood pressure to help them pass fluid and make weight might be advantageous, especially if it makes them feel good as well. So the idea with tapering is to minimise that fatigue without compromising fitness, but crucially is maintaining your training intensity if you can. Reducing training volume by about 40 to 60%. But trying to maintain that frequency of training as well. So you can reduce volume by cutting out a session or 2 or 3 and still having a hard session, when really what's important is having that training frequency, because boxers and combat athletes, they like to be training, they like to feel good from training, and so if you can manipulate load but still have them training frequently, plus you get your contact with them as well, because it's usually a positive experience. And so that's going to help them as well. It's something different to what they're used to. Maybe staying at home, just under the covers, relaxing, and just being generally bored. Coming in to come and see you as your coach and doing some session that's going to make you feel fired up. It's going to make you feel great psychologically. Yeah. So if you're taking anything away, it's intensity in your boxing, intensity in your physical training as well. That's key. So if you can individualise the taper duration depending upon your athlete, then that's the best that you can do. So don't take this as gospel that you need to do 2 weeks and follow these guidelines specifically, because everyone's different. People like different things. So just make it specific. And expect performance improvements by 0.5 to 6%. So you can do a really good block of training, but it might not be the most effective. But then if you do a really excellent taper, you can catapult that as well. So if you think you've done a bad block of training, or for whatever reason, and then you nail that taper, then that's going to have a positive effect on performance. And you might expect to see
In taper
In it,
weeks, will you have also high day, medium day, low day?
no, they're all mainly like low days, aren't they? Really, yeah. We don't tend to look at training load from a medium high in a taper.
In training week.
In the taper.
We'll might do a run on the Monday if the fight on the Saturday. Yeah. And then that's probably the heaviest day, and then probably just bring them down nice and steady. Yeah, but intense.
Still intense. If anything, it's reversed. So instead of going up, it's reversed. So you might do for the taper, a relatively high load session at the start of the week or at the start of the taper, and then decrease as you go through.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that section from Alan. That's actually delivered on our Ultimate Coaching for Combat Sports workshop. We are going to be releasing some more dates quite soon. If this does interest you, make sure you pass on an inquiry and just email us at boxing.sci@gmail.com. Some of the methods that we use at Boxing Science, they differ from different situations. So we might have a boxer that's quite strong. I wouldn't be afraid to kind of do some lighter lifts, maybe some like plyometric explosive exercises such as like trap bar jumps, or maybe like kind of 50% load and looking at velocity based training. That's for strong athletes that might not have a lot of weight to lose. So probably for our amateur boxers that need to keep up their strength if they're having multiple bouts within a short time period. Now for some of our professionals that might not be as strong or might have a little bit of weight to lose, we've got to be thinking, how much benefit will we get from actually lifting them on fight week. So they'll be doing mainly body weight stuff, plyometric work, really dynamic movement. We'll do some banded shadow box. Probably the only kind of weights, external loads that they'll do is either medicine ball work or some light landmine punches. Mostly stop doing anything like that 3 days before weighing. So let's say on a Friday they weigh in, on Tuesday that'll be their last strength conditioning session, and then mainly it's going to be kind of the stretching and everything like that. If they have to lose a bit of weight, they might have a little bit of a calorie burner, but other than that, the main work finishes on Tuesday. For the boxing work, they mainly finish Tuesday or Wednesday as well. Amateur boxers, I probably do the same session that a professional would on the Tuesday. I'll probably let them do that on the Thursday, or maybe even the Friday. Let's say if they're boxing on Saturday, they'll be able to do that on the day before, no problem. And I'll probably look to try and lift them a little bit earlier on in the week. In terms of running, for professionals, I don't do any running on fight week. They'll do the last run 7 days before, so let's say if they're boxing on the Saturday, it'll be the Saturday before that. But for amateurs, they'll be doing some sort of kind of light conditioning. I say light conditioning, low volume stuff, and it depends on the intensity as well to what they've been doing. So let's say if they've been doing a high speed block, they would be doing 10-second sprints with 1 minute off. So just keep the intensity up there, and that's around about 90%, 95% of their max speed. If they haven't been doing a sprinting phase, you don't just put in 10 seconds straight away. You don't want them to the acute spike in intensity. This can actually risk kind of neural fatigue, or might risk some sort of injuries as well. So if they haven't been doing any speed work or sprinting, and they have a bout, let's do something like Tabatas, so 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, between 6 and 8 reps, and about 2 to 3 sets. And then other things that I'd consider is doing mobility, keeping them loose, keeping them fresh. I'd be doing this let's say evening after the weigh-in, or the morning of the fight, and then it's fight night. Okay, so that's a snapshot of how tapering strategies are performed in boxing, and especially at Boxing Science as well. Like I said before, very complicated and contrasting area. You've got to be tailored to the individual and individual situations as well. So you've just got to think, how's the athlete feeling? How much weight they've got to lose? How strong they are? And you've got to think about risk versus reward as well. You know, how much will this little bit of work that we're doing there, let's say like adding extra 10 kilos on a lift or doing deadlifts a little bit closer to a fight, how much reward will he actually get from that, to how riskful it can be for like being successful in competition. That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Like I said at the start of the video, it means a lot to us if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. So make sure you press the subscribe button and join us for the next episode. Thank you very much.
Wow.